Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. It is day 3 of my 7-day vegan challenge, and today it's well past noon and I'm about to go on a walk. It turned out to be a sunny day. It started out very cloudy, pretty cold, which normally wouldn't prevent me from going for a walk, but there was something about the past few days of cold that made me prefer to stay inside, just basically staying warm with my recovering pup and kind of resting away the day. Have you ever had a time frame like that where you basically felt like you just wanted to rest, like everything was dauntingly overwhelming, where things you thought you did were somehow not completed, and where things that you thought were completed presented themselves as new obstacles? That's kind of how it's felt for a good long while in my life and confirmation. And some people may not understand when I use little signs of synchronicity for confirmation. I'm going to unplug this for now because we're not going anywhere in a particular hurry. And at the same time, again, little details of confirmation, like when I mention sometimes if a bird flies overhead when I'm talking about something, or a plane even, or someone honks a horn. There are little details of confirmation that are just interestingly timed to the point where, you know, if you're listening, you know that someone is listening, that some higher power is listening to you as you're asking these questions to the universe. Like, for an example, please, can you show me a sign of what's to come next? As we ask for these things to happen, we are almost always inevitably presented with those signs of what's going to happen next. Some people will call it prayer, and some people will get offended if you call it meditation. The difference is that there are people who will become offended. And for anyone else who's in a positive mindset, having a positive journey, the confirmations are always of a positive type, even if they seem negative. The thing is, again, we have to pay attention. And when we pay attention, and as we refine how we respond to things, then we recognize what journey we're possibly supposed to take in order to get out of the rut. Now, earlier I asked if you've had any of those time frames where you felt kind of stuck in place. And today was one of those days where I felt a dip energetically. I felt a lower point than normal. And at the same time, I'm going through a process. This is the 7-day vegan challenge. I want to share with you my energy, how I'm able to communicate, how I feel, just so that you can understand whether or not you might be terrified of trying this, or if you might instead decide to try it, because it's like, well, this guy's still alive after 3 days. He hasn't succumbed to any kind of terrible illness because he's no longer eating those things that our fathers taught us about eating meat every day. And if you can see that I'm doing that, and that I'm about to go for a walk, and that I'm about to enjoy all of this energy that I'm going to receive from my walk, and that I overcame the feeling of almost being lethargic on the 3rd day, then maybe you yourself will consider attempting a 7-day vegan challenge. Let me tell you, by the time you reach day 3 of not having had meat or any kind of animal-based foods, you're going to recognize that you can do this for 3 more days, which makes it quite simple to envision doing it for 7 days. The whole aspect about changing your health and changing your life and changing your direction is that there has to be some kind of a change to begin with. And if we don't take that time, that opportunity to change, then what's going to happen is we are going to absolutely remain stuck in a rut where we cannot figure out why we're unable to change our current, our energy, our subscription base. Speaking of, have you chosen to click on subscribe yet? I hope you have. This channel is an absolute outlet for me to be able to share information. And that means if I'm presenting this information from an outlet and you're plugging in, then you're getting energized from this content. So this channel is absolutely an outlet that I hope that you're plugging into so that you can absolutely recharge on your day as well. So thank you so much for watching, everyone who is subscribing right now and who's choosing to tune in and who's understanding that we're talking just about a 7-day vegan challenge once again, about our health. We're talking about how wellness and conservation tie together. We're talking about confirmation of the signs that we choose to receive and practice to tune into. We're talking about life, deep thinkers. We're talking about how come the sun is presenting me with a halo effect as I'm driving, not off into the sunset, but off into the unknown. The sunset oftentimes is something that we already know about. We've already studied, we've already understood what we think is coming. But what about the unknown? The unknown and the daunting is something that normally will terrify many adults. If you were to ask me as a child, hey, would you like to go on a journey? Would you like to go on an adventure to, let's just say, somewhere in West Texas? I would say absolutely. I'd want to do that right now. In fact, if it's cold, I'll put on some cold climate gear. And over, as a child, I would just say yes. As an adult, there are many things that we can feel bound by, that we can feel like we are obligated to complete. In fact, there are obligations that are leveraged towards us in realms that maybe we don't belong, and also in realms that we do belong. What I mean is, sometimes, have you ever been offered any kind of work where you're being paid generously to do one thing, but you're really being tasked with doing something else? I used to be an IT professional. I've also at times been an IT unprofessional. And as an IT professional, I remember I was paid handsomely to fix the systems that our network was running on in different increments, in different intervals. And through that work, I also saw that I wasn't even really touching those systems. I was more a numbers reporter. I was more, I guess some people would call it some kind of a counter of kernels of something or another. I was a ticket taker. I was someone who would tell you the percentage of completion on a project that I was tasked with. Only I wasn't the one handling the project directly. So, in other words, I wasn't actually logging onto the systems and correcting any of the situations that we were experiencing. I had a team, and all of that meant that my former experience working directly on servers was not exactly what I was being tasked with. I was, however, being paid for doing all kinds of tasks, usually involving a spreadsheet and reporting information at meetings in a way that seemed somehow bearable. So, what I'm telling you is about a personal example of when I've been paid for doing something and yet I was really tasked with doing something else. Many of us are in the same kind of roles where the job description sometimes doesn't exactly fit what our real experience is when it comes to the work that we're thinking that we're doing. The same thing can be said of spirituality. The same thing can be said of health. When we are driving towards health, when we are driving towards spirituality, sometimes what was in the manual is a little different. There can be so many examples, and there are an infinite number of possibilities for alternate outcomes, for stories that haven't been told, because each of us are unique and we're going through our own unique experience. So in my experience, what I started doing was trying to showcase how health, mental and physical, was absolutely vital. And some of the reasons that we would use to justify that are our cognitive capabilities, our ability to remember things and to follow through. So for today, for an example, I received a message from a great friend of mine who asked me about something that they had sent me in the mail. In my mind, in this reality that I'm in, I felt as if I had sent a response confirming the receipt of this item that was sent to me in the mail, this information that was sent to me in the mail, this energy that was sent to me in the mail. And what happened, apparently, according to my history, was there does not appear to be any incident of me ever having confirmed the receipt of this message, this information, this energy, which is quite unusual because I'm fairly on top of all the things that I get done, and when I do them, I know that they're done. There are certain things that are outstanding right now. I know that someone is asking for me to help with some systems issues in another state, and I can't tell you when I'm going to be there. Right now, I've been going on a day-to-day basis, dealing with the things that are right at my doorstep in some cases. So I believed I had sent something, but I didn't. And sometimes I start to wonder if I'm in a parallel universe where some of the things that multiple people are able to confirm happening are not documented. They're not earmarked the way that we thought they would be, which makes us wonder at times about and talk about parallel universes and alternative theories of certain things that many people won't discuss because it sounds too far-fetched. In the land of someone who believes in everything happening, when someone asks you about going to a place in West Texas or anywhere, and when as a child we drop everything except for whatever items that we know we're going to need for those conditions, and even if we don't grab any of those items that are necessary for those conditions, those adventures often present us with solutions to things that we didn't even know were obstacles. In a great way, electronics has done the same thing to help bring difficult conversations to light when they have not been fully exposed. So I know I'm kind of going off in a strange direction. We're still talking about health. We're still talking about, this is day 3 today. Earlier, I started out with some cherries. I had some cherries, and then I had a banana, and I had a couple of glasses of water. And so far, that's what I've fueled up on for my day. And many people will think, oh, well, that's not really a meal. You know, I can't believe you're doing that. I wouldn't do that. That's a little bit extreme. And for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and definitely disassociate with this channel. It's not the snakes this time. It's the fact that you're talking about not having steaks. The fact is, cherries and bananas are food. Many of the things that we think that we enjoy, for an example, let's just say a belt strainer type burger from someplace, and a cherry flavored soda. All of these flavors are derived from things that are natural, less processed, more nourishing. And the more direct that we receive the content of the energy that we're consuming, the more nourishment we're going to receive. So instead of having a cherry Coke and a belt stretcher burger of some sort, I had some real cherries. Instead of having a banana split with basically all the different things that go with the nutritious content that goes into that, I had the banana. Instead of having seconds of some kind of stupendous meal, I had additional cherries. And with all of that, yesterday, I had something that was even more impossible when it comes to our health, in the form of an Impossible Burger from a burger place that claims to be the ruler of places that have burgers. They also offer Impossible Burger options, which we enjoyed. And as part of that experience, since I'm bringing it to you as it happens, I noticed that I didn't lose any weight content. I almost thought I did, because as I weighed myself earlier, the scale registered 117.3 briefly. And it kept teetering between 117.3 and 117.5. And then finally it settled on 117.5. Well, if you remember yesterday, deep thinkers, what I weighed was 117.5. I recognize that this weight is going to vary and fluctuate according to all sorts of things. On this vegan journey, I've noticed that when you really do take seriously the vegan approach, what happens is we will absolutely lose weight or maintain a constant if we're not overindulging in those offerings. So that's the reason I'm mentioning what I had yesterday for a meal and what it did, what the noteworthy, I guess, after effect was the day after. That way we can all understand whether or not this is something that we want to incorporate into our own trajectory of health management. I almost called it weight management, but it's not. This has nothing to do with my weight. Although an unexpected side effect, and not unexpected side effect of being healthy, is having a healthy body. If my body is difficult to fit into the clothing that I know for a fact that I should be able to wear, if somebody calls me up and asks me, hey, I want to go to West Texas, and in order to go to West Texas, maybe you might need to have some hiking clothes. And if my hiking clothes that have fit me for decades are not fitting me because they're too tight, my health might have fluctuated somewhere. And if I excuse it away by constantly buying something new to never take into consideration the fact that maybe I need to be trying something new instead of buying something new, then again, the journey never takes shape. So again, this is kind of a long, detailed explanation of what's going on today as I'm journeying through traffic, trying to keep my memory in one place, trying to be sharp enough to explain that this is day 3 of my vegan journey. It's not just day 3. I quoted it the other day because I've done this before. And I've done this before in a way where I know that this is right. I understand the benefits that come from this. I understand the health turnaround and the energy that comes from doing the right thing. What I don't understand is how any of us can look at the alternative as a solution. And by alternative, what I mean is the standard. When we do the standard American diet, the SAD, when we adhere to the standard American diet and don't ever give consideration to the alternative, which is really the real way to be doing things. When we don't give credit to the nutrients in food because we don't even register some items as food, such as fruits, vegetables, nuts, when we don't acknowledge the actual food, the actual mother of the process, Mother Nature, when we don't acknowledge anything around us for the blessings and the bounty that we have, it's a sign of being ungrateful. When we're ungrateful, it's much easier to take advantage of a system because it was free or it was discounted or it was convenient. When we recognize the beauty of the life that it takes to bring these energies to us, what we recognize is there is beauty all around us, and all we're doing is merging our energies into a combined outcome. Whether it's got, extra lettuce and tomatoes or not. And with all of that being said, I'm arriving at my destination. I just wanted to talk for a little bit about day 3. Wanted to make sure I had something to share that was insightful. And I think that we covered many bases to include, again, the foods that we're having on this journey and what the actual impact was, what the results were. And in order to experience that, some of us just want to ride along first and experience it as a passenger. I know because I've done the same thing. And as I learned from someone else, as I was the passenger for another person who is quite smart, what I learned is that everything's a lot more fun when you're joining in with friends. So if you have a friend ask you if you want to join them on a journey in a remote area of West Texas, don't forget there are many excuses we could come up with, and there are also many possibilities that we could consider just as easily as the fear-based alternatives that seem to normally be the primary thing that many of us think about, instead of the primary thing being hanging out with one another as valued friends. So thanks again for watching this journey. We started out in kind of the same way we wound up, with the sun right over us. And here I am. Here I am at one of my favorite wilderness areas. And I'm going to look for wilderness. It is, I believe it said it was close to 60 degrees outside, which isn't particularly hot. It's definitely not something that normally would make an abundance of insects come out. But it's bright and sunny, so there's no telling what we'll see as the last bits of the sun are crossing over this hill that I'm about to walk around. And if we do see something, of course, I'll share it in this clip. I might even include it going over, me trying to ramble here and try to figure out how do I tie together this incoherent mumbo jumbo that most people hear. How do I make it relevant? How do I make it relevant to say, I'm going into nature, recognizing that there are seasons, recognizing that there are animals struggling, recognizing that we can take things that are less destructive, still taking from many of the conveniences that are in our proximity. And also, I'm recognizing that maybe I should be doing with less, just like nature is right now, during this transitionary period, when we may not need as much energy to rest between all of the work that we've been assigned, when we may not need as much energy because the recovery process has already begun. When we may not need as much energy because we need to use that energy for something that's more beneficial than just enjoying the same old shows over and over without giving thanks, without giving regard, without gratitude. Instead of that, what I'm bringing to us is an opportunity to reflect on why we might feel anxiety, how the effects of anxiety manifest into other things that we were not often expecting, and why some of the things that we were expecting may not show any evidence of ever having been completed. There are so many things in this world that confirm what we're doing and give us subtle nudges to do more if we're privy to the language of paying attention. In order to pay attention, we simply need to focus. And once we maintain focus, we're able to move forward without anybody else's input and while still successfully completing all those things that we are tasked with. So thank you so much for following along on this segment of the Jeep Journey, the Jeep Journals, where I'm talking about the journey and where I'm talking about day 3 of this 7-day vegan challenge, and where we're basically encouraging one another to stick to a plan of health and to overcome the darkness, overcome the adversity, overcome the challenges by simply letting go. There's some segment of religion where you'll say, let the Creator, you can rephrase it however you hear it in your mind. Let go, let the universe. I can say it in any rendition and give credit to the fact that this is coming from God, a higher power. Let go, let God. I can say that. And I can say the peaceful words as we were taught to pray according to the general textbook that we all, in this nation at least, have had access to. Because there's nothing that it says that's divisive. And I can continue to suggest on this channel, the journey that we are experiencing, no matter what our creed is whether or not we attribute any kind of gratitude towards that higher power that brings us together. Even on this very channel, where I have outlandishly used a platform to give people ways to communicate with me about difficult subjects that some people simply refuse to communicate about. So as far as why that's happening, no matter which line of employment, no matter which services that I'm performing to repair systems, the primary mission that I find myself always tasked with has nothing to do with the actual job of repairing a computer, unless you give credit to the fact that that computer that I'm repairing, I'm bringing it to a fuller sense of completion. And so with that creation in mind, maybe I'm honoring the higher power that created all of us by trying to use my minimal knowledge of a simple, singular type of task to take care of the things that are in disarray around me. The interesting journey that I've been on at the same time tells me maybe we could already have stopped producing more tech stuff right now, especially knowing that there's going to be a type of a shortage for all the work that needs to be done to continuously maintain those systems. And maybe we need to backtrack just a little bit so that the retirees can come out of retirement and return to their field of expertise and help communicate with the generation that moves all of us forward with the actual work, and help communicate that we don't need all that meat. We don't need to have a beef with so-and-so. I want to have a tomato grown out of the garden with so-and-so. That's the other thing I enjoyed today that I forgot to mention, deep thinkers. I had some tomatoes from my own garden. The tomatoes during the recent freeze, they stopped putting out new fruit, the plants that I have. They look like at least a couple of them went into a state of hibernation, dormancy. But I still have tomatoes from my garden. And I was able to enjoy those. And I'm able to share that happiness with you, the abundance, even though you weren't right there with me enjoying that in my garden. But I tell you what, if ever we get a chance to ride along together to any place, West Texas, East Texas, North Texas, some other state altogether, that's like a whole other part of the nation, because Texas is its own nation for the most part. If we get to travel to any place and I happen to have some ripe tomatoes from my garden, I'll absolutely bring them along so that you can sample them and enjoy them. And in fact, I'll continue to show them to you on this channel. If you backtrack, you can see there's some times where I pluck them right off the vine and enjoy them. That's what nature out there is doing on these cold days. It's looking for the food that sometimes isn't there, especially after the freezes that happened, which caused a decimation of a lot of the vegetation that was here. Some of the things that are out there are a little tougher to find, including the wildlife. I've done my best to continue to see these things and bring that content to you. And I do that against all odds as the sun is setting, when there's very little time to figure out how to pull off these extreme adventures that aren't really so extreme. As a child, again, we would just run out, come back approximately whenever sunset happened. We knew. As an adult, we're teaching our children, you don't know these things. You don't know what's out there. And partly we don't know what's out there because we ourselves have been too afraid to get out there and look for ourselves at the bounty that's around us and figure out how to give thanks for the things that are around us rather than how to be afraid of all the things that we fear might go wrong. Fear is something that we can leave behind. Fear is something that comes from agitation, anxiety. Anxiety is something that we can literally do away with by eating the right nutrients. And of course, surrounding ourselves with the right crowd. And also subscribing to the correct channels. You know, if we're subscribing only to those news channels that have, and up after this, we're going to have this other information about so-and-so. And then you get an advertisement for all the foods and sugary things that sound pleasant. It would sound so great to have that cherry drink from that vendor. It would be so great to have that dashed over to us, to our door, while we're continuing to watch this show that shows after the break all of the terrible things, because that's the thing that apparently many of us want to tune into. When we learn to tune into something other than death, destruction, theft, when we're able to tune into something other than that, then we're going to be able to acknowledge, be grateful for, acknowledge even the bad stuff. We can acknowledge and be grateful for it. All these things that I'm saying, if they're causing agitation, anxiety, again, some of us are having an extreme time disconnecting from these things. I know that it's difficult because this is at least the 4th or 5th time that I've gone on the 7-day vegan challenge. And it's been difficult to give up that country fried comfort that I used to have regularly. Those tacos that came with all the different trimmings of animal life that I in the past hardly gave thanks for or a thought to. There are so many things that I recognize that I assimilated into my own self as something that I'm aware of. That way, with this awareness, I can go a step further and now do something different. Until I became aware that there was an issue, or I should say, until I stopped overlooking the awareness that there was some type of an issue, I was unable to make any kind of progress to change those actions that I myself was taking. It's nobody else's actions that are putting me in the health position that I'm in. It's sure genetic or even systematic in terms of a region that we might come up with as far as what kind of health anomalies we could be exposed to and expressing. And at the same time, many of the plant-based meal alternatives that I'm mentioning right now are available in probably many demographics where you are hearing this, whether it's in some format or another, whether it's figs, cherries, kiwis, papayas, coconuts, cantaloupes, raspberries, blueberries, whether it's any of these types of fruits, nuts, or vegetables, whether they're immediately off the vine fresh or whether you've had to store them because in your region it's not possible to go in and draw those resources. Remember, wildlife is doing the same thing. Wildlife is doing the same thing in a way that it adapted to be able to do during these same adversities that we're experiencing. And some of the adversities are becoming more and more challenging. Do any of you believe that some of the system that we're in, some of the ecosystems that we are in are being challenged? Or do we continue to overlook that detail as something that cannot possibly be true? Do we believe that there's an abundance enough to where we should be able to share across the globe in ways that allow us to come together and to comfortably navigate the treacherous adversities that we're facing together? Or do we believe that the safety of the television and seeing it from behind the screen is the only way to persist and to overcome? Many of the things that I'm saying, again, it's like, you didn't have to talk for this long about the third day of your 7-day vegan challenge. And at the same time, I'm going to suggest over and over and over and over and over again, for many more reasons than I can even count on both hands, that even spending time subscribing to content and watching content with somebody or something that you resonate with, could be wildlife, could be a machine, it could be whatever it is, there's something you resonate with, and you want to find out how to make this situation more sustainable. You want to find out how to make this situation more achievable. There's nobody that looks at a beautiful car and says, I never want to drive that thing. It's beautiful. I really feel like a connection with it, but I'll never want to drive that thing. There's not enough of them in the world. I want that other person to have it. A mass manufactured item, even a one-off beautiful car, is something that needed to have a caretaker. And that caretaker, it's like the systems that we're trying to make, these systems, these networks, these infrastructures. What about the system and network and infrastructure of nature itself? What is it about nature that is so restorative? And how can it be that we can overlook the fact that the cherry soda that's flavored after the real cherries is not nearly as valuable as the cherries themselves? How is it that we can recognize that the information that we share across the global sphere, how is it that we can recognize all the adversity and trauma of the situations that we're being presented with and never give consideration to the fact that our demand for these plastic-based solutions for transportation are causing some kind of grief? How can we continue to be ungrateful for something unless it's simply because we're overlooking those things? Our own children possibly are being overlooked. Our own children are possibly being struck down from the conversation and communication. And our own children, when I say that, I'm 45 years old by the calendar dates that we know in this society. And at that age, I'm telling you, I feel like an only child who's been struck down repeatedly and struck repeatedly by my own father. And I don't mean that as just a pun. I don't mean it as a riddle. This really has happened. Our adults are getting to a point where nutritionally the deficit is causing cognitive failure. It's causing anxiety. It's causing disturbances among the conversations that we used to have. So the nutrients that we could all benefit from having, for an example, real cherries, real blueberries, not just flavored versions of whatever the thing is that we're consuming, not just advertised and flavored news channels. The thing that we could be having, our own fathers are lashing out at and striking down. So I've absorbed a lot of negative health. And when I talk, there is a percentage of health that comes out that can seem fiery, can seem intense, can seem driven. So when I wake up feeling a little bit tired and I need to rest, well, I do that. And I also do my best to take advantage of the moments of beauty as they're occurring and to share those bits of beauty, and also to record content that someone can look at and somehow ingest hope from. Now, I said I have extra awesomeness stored up in me. I had gained a little bit of weight, and then I'm releasing that awesomeness. And I might have mistakenly said that I'm not releasing that awesomeness so that you can take it on. What I meant was, I don't want anyone to just binge on what I'm saying and gain any weight from it. So if you're having to wait to accomplish what you're doing, what you thought you were going to be doing, maybe find another time to look at this. But if you're waiting already, like let's say you're in some room where you're needing to get something checked out so you can get a prescription, and maybe you're in a waiting pattern, watch this, multitask. You can fuel up on multiple aspects of nourishment at the same time without overindulging on things that are calorie free. There's no calories in this video. So as you've watched it for almost 45 minutes thinking, man, the other day I watched a video of this guy's and it was an hour. There are some people who are trying to move an hour at a time through situations where there are insights that only they can see. There are voices and visions that only they have because of the unique perspective that they're experiencing. In my world, the weirdest things present themselves to me over and over. And oftentimes, all I got to say is it's a journey. It's a unique journey. It's a unique journey for everybody. Some people are pretty pleased to go into cold experiences with nothing, hardly anything on. And some people have to have a jacket. It's the children who often just run out and enjoy things. And the childlike in their mind who often just run out and enjoy things, even without seeing any of those attributes other than what they are. If I see someone in a super cold climate and they're barely wearing shorts, and I ask them, how are you doing that? I would want to learn. In my past, as I was plant-based for almost a year straight, during that time frame, I noticed that as the seasons changed, as the temperatures changed, as it got hotter, as it got colder, as it was frigid, as it was boiling, I didn't feel those same pains that I used to feel when I was mostly meat-based. So you can take it for what it is. You can hear all this information in the shorter segments and the longer segments. I've shared so much information, I sometimes don't know what to cover repeatedly and regularly. I know that when I touch on certain topics, they touch into all of the fibers of everything that we've learned. And so sometimes I didn't know in the past, do I give credit to a higher power? Always we give credit to a higher power. Because without that level of belief, without that level of acceptance of one another, we're simply overlooking and not nourishing what it is that was there to be nourished. The only thing we're here for is to nourish one another, and to do that out of gratitude for the opportunity we received from being put on this planet to begin with. We have an opportunity, whether this is considered an opportunity of stagnation, whether it's considered an opportunity of flourishing abundance, whether it's considered a lack of opportunity. This place is filled with opportunity. Every place I go to turns up some new experience, some new wealth, some new benefit that I get to experience with friends, sometimes who I meet that very day. So I don't want to go too much longer. I really do want to take advantage of this sunlight before it dips down over the hill. And so I'm going to hit the trails. Today's day 3. I came in at 117.5 from yesterday's 118.3. And the scale varied just a little bit. I almost was 117.3. So I almost lost a full kilo. I know I said yesterday I lost about a kilo. That's approximately true. It's probably already true. At this point, it's just a scale. You know how scales are. They want to give us something to work for. That's how we look at these tools sometimes, and that's why I switched my scale from pounds to kilos. In fact, in a future segment on this channel, I'm going to post whether or not it's easier to lose weight in pounds or in kilos. Is it easier to lose weight in a weight measurement system that I'm aware of, that I'm fully aware of and have known for my entire life? Or is it easier to lose weight when I have fun and I use another variable to measure that experience by? So again, we can even choose how we think of measuring certain experiences and recognize that we can do better. We can have fun instead of constantly tuning in to what's after the advertised segment that's being sold to us, one convenience throwaway item at a time, in a way that does not benefit my fellow human beings, my fellow wildlife, my fellow trails. So, in fact, that's probably what I want to finish with, is that I am going to try to record some nature. I am going to incorporate that into today's clip. Whatever I saw today, I'm going to incorporate into this clip itself. And it may, like I said, it may be superimposed. It may overlay what you're seeing. You might not see my beautiful smile and waving and my face here. You might be seeing nature at this point. But what you're going to be seeing also is any type of interesting packaging that I find out here that's from a one-time use source. And the reason that I'm going to include that today, it's not because it's ugly and it needs to be vilified and chastised. The thing is, it's there. And until we acknowledge that there's an issue, until our fathers and mothers acknowledge that there's an issue, these things are going to continue to be sold. When we acknowledge these one-time use items, then at that point, we will acknowledge that there is an issue. When we're able to discuss the issue, we will not look at other climate activists or climate specialists. Let's not call it an activist anymore. When we see other climate activists, when we see other climate solvers, problem solvers, when we acknowledge other problem solvers, like Greta, who I mentioned in my previous clip in this series, when we acknowledge that we have problem solvers, we will no longer bully them. When we acknowledge that the problem solvers are a part of our community, we will respect that. We will give gratitude that we had problem solvers in the community to begin with. Without having gratitude for those problem solvers, what are they to do except for wither away? Whether or not we appreciate one another, we have to. And some things will inevitably pass away throughout time, but still, whether we wither or not, whether we are withering or not, all of us have the energy right now to acknowledge one another, to enjoy the presence that we bring to one another, the presence that we share with one another, the gifts of time that we share with one another as we're waiting for whatever we're waiting on to learn, as we're interacting with one another in these random and not so random avenues, as we're sharing the trails together on these remote and not so remote systems, as we're recognizing the wilderness area that we're in for the wilderness that it has, as we're recognizing one another as wilderness who is entrusted to see and to speak and to hear the truth, as we recognize that this system includes us and is not separate from us, and as we recognize that all the things that we watch on the other side of the screen sometimes seem separate from us, as we recognize that that veil, that illusion of separation, that the very illusion of separation between you and I on this screen, as we recognize that this is all an illusion, and that this experience can be as wholesome or as morally compromised as we choose to experience it, as we recognize that this experience sometimes comes down to what we put in our own hands, at that point in time, we will have acknowledged whether or not there is an issue. And once we acknowledge whether or not there's an issue, then we can move forward. So again, I hope you enjoy this journey. I hope you understand what's being captured on this content, what's being shared here. I hope you understand that I did talk for a little bit longer so that we could get to almost an hour, possibly an hour on this segment. I hope you understand that I'm not charging for these hourly consultations. I'm not charging for it. I am asking that you share some type of energy if you watched and followed along for this long. I am asking that you understand that as an interconnected species across the board, without these conversations and without nourishing these conversations, they can't hardly take any kind of flowering and nurture that which is around them. However, many things do not necessarily require direct nurturing to become the strongest that they can become. In fact, adversity probably grows the strongest, longest lasting, gnarled, awesome growths that we will ever have known on this planet. Those adverse conditions, whether they come from under the sea, above the sky, above the earth, on mountaintops, or in the hottest climates ever known and recorded, and whether we can even consider that there are other things that we've never even recorded, we can't really deny the fact that in the Leviathan, in the depth of the oceans, at the extremes of our mountaintops, and at the fringes of our fault lines and our geothermal experiences, we can absolutely become aware of nature's persistence through any adversity that we have seen nature presented with. So that begs to introduce a question: what adversity are we going through? For me, I had the comfort of being able to sleep today. There are people who are experiencing war-torn shelling and being caged apart from their families, being detained for trying to get a job that we take so much for granted, that we feel some sense when we hear People are quitting their jobs in unbelievable numbers. We feel some sense of concern, but not enough to go out and start doing that job ourselves for whatever it is that we were specialists in the realm of. What kind of adversity is that when our communities fall apart to the point where our fathers won't chip in, our sons basically are tied up trying to earn the same benefits so that we can enjoy that armchair time, so that we can watch the game, comment on it as we drink our brew? What is it about this era that makes us so quick to overlook one another so much that we wouldn't even get together for the holidays with those families that we were entrusted to safeguard? As we talk about these topics, again, some of it can sound quite daunting, quite overwhelming, possibly can seem sad, but there has to be an awareness. And in order for there to have been awareness, someone had to communicate it properly. And in order for communication to occur, some ignition of a light has to occur in someone's mind. And in order for that ignition of a light to occur, some action, some aspect of change has to occur in order for us to change direction to begin with. Otherwise, sometimes we tend to go in the same direction as we've always gone in without any consideration for anything else. So I hope on this journey you've enjoyed seeing the wildlife that I did see today. I didn't even know I was going to see it. In fact, I still don't know what I'm going to see because I'm talking about it before I actually walked out into it. I'm going to have to walk a little quicker so that I get around the hill before the light goes down, before the sun goes down. It's going to be a little chillier, so I'm going to be encountering things that are going to be on the extreme fringes of being able to endure these temperature anomalies. And the only way that this is going to happen is if there was any wildlife to see in this wilderness area to begin with. If I'm only seeing plastic and you're only seeing plastic rubbish throughout this video, please forgive me. I'm not trying to make an ugly video. I'm making a video of awareness. This is day 3 of my 7-day vegan challenge, where I'm trying to raise an awareness of how wellness and conservation are tied together, how one-time use and how one-time abuse, and how the abuse of our system, to include our very own children, to include our very own wildlife, to include our very own adults, how the abuse of our system has been leveraged, brought to us and sold by entertainment. And how I'm talking about these things knowing that there's possibly an artificial intelligence taking inventory of everything I'm saying, and how there's possibly even groups of people, individuals who don't like what I'm saying and who are going to try to use it as weapons. You can't really weaponize peace, except for the more that you try to bottle it up, the further it's going to explode. The light, the brilliance of light, the brilliance of peace, the brilliance of the shining light is always going to be way more powerful than any darkness. And that darkness, if it has an awareness, also recognizes the power of the light. You know, if the darkness and the light had awareness to begin with. Balance. Those aspects, when we acknowledge that there's balance, when we acknowledge that things could be out of balance, and when we acknowledge that we ourselves might be a part of bringing balance to the situation, then maybe some of us might get back to work. It's possible. Sometimes we need a complete team to accomplish certain jobs, certain tasks. And right now, as I've stated on here several times, I'm looking for my team. Thank you so much for everyone who's subscribing. This has been overwhelming to see the number of participants go up almost overnight, especially as I'm recording this 2 weeks in advance, not knowing that there's going to be even more change. Thank you so much for joining. Until next time, this is day 3. I'll report back each day for the first 7 days of this 7-day vegan challenge so that you can also experience freedom, peace, love, and all that old school stuff. Have a great day.